All right.
Good morning, everybody. As introduced, my name is Michael Teicher, and I'm Chief Revenue Officer of Scripps Networks, home to several national networks like ION, Bounce TV, which is targeted to African Americans, Laugh, Grit, newly launched Scripps News, completely down the middle, fact-based, nonpartisan news presentation. All of our networks are available free over the air via digital antennas, and all of our networks and more are available as fast services and apps on all major CTV platforms. So it's my pleasure to introduce Matt today, who is the Chief Brand Officer of Teicher Brands, but he has a really interesting past. And I think one of the best ways to drive context for the conversation and maybe some of your questions a little bit later is to understand how he got to where he is today. So if you don't mind, take us through a little bit of your career journey and how you got here.
Sure. Good morning. There's not enough Bloody Marys out in the audience, I don't think, quite yet. But I've been fortunate to have a really varied career path. Spent a lot of time at Mattel, the toy company. Worked on the Barbie brand for quite a bit. Spent some time at Amazon. Survived that. Lived to tell the tale. And I am now at Teicher Brands. So Teicher Brands, if you don't know, is the parent company of brands like Men's Wearhouse, which I'm sure you do know, and a few other men's specialty retailers. And I think what's been interesting in my career path, Michael, as you and I spoke in advance of today, was I seem to get tapped for these brand transformations. And so a brand is maybe a little stagnant or is not connecting with the audience, or even in the year 2023 is primarily focused on television advertising. And so, I will come in and take a quick assessment of that. And I think I've had some, knock on wood, success with repositioning brands. And so I think as I look at my role today as Chief Brands Officer for Teicher Brands, coming out of the pandemic, ourselves, like a lot of other brands out there, pulled back on our marketing. We started to see stagnation with our brand awareness. And so my role was really created to evangelize all the brands in our portfolio and reintroduce ourselves to customers. And we've had a fast and successful start thus far.
That's good news. So I do think it's funny to go certainly from Barbie to Men's Wearhouse, two distinctly different audiences that you're trying to reach. But let's stay big picture for the moment, because I don't think there's an industry that's undergone more transformation, more obstacles, more ways to buy merchandise than the retail industry. So as you think about the last several years, and then flash forward the pandemic, by the way, so as you think about this really iterative transformation over the last several years, talk about some of the things you've either had to witness, work through, or pivot in the retail industry.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think anyone in here who works in retail, like, we all have badges of honor at this stage, because there is a ton of fluctuation. And even today, a lot of unknowns with sort of like how the retail environment's going to operate going forward, and where customers are going to want to shop with us, how we serve them, so on and so forth. And so I would say, within that, one thing that, especially over the past few years with the pandemic, which at some point, can we just stop talking about that time and move on? But during that time, what we did realize, where we had our stores closed entirely for a number of months, then we reopened, but there's a lot of caution with people coming back in. And so I always love being as insight driven as possible. We had an insight on the Joseph A. Bank brand around, of all things, people wanting polo shirts. You don't need a suit necessarily to take Zoom calls from home, but you do want to look a little bit dressed up. And so in the middle of winter, when nobody normally buys polo shirts, we quadrupled our marketing investment against that category. We owned the category for about 6 months, 3x the sales for the year in polo shirts. And it's a small, but for me, salient example of like how you kind of like pivot your business based on what's in front of you. Super unexpected, but we all rallied around it really quickly and found success there.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's dig into your business now. And I think certainly feel free to talk about Joseph A. Bank, but I think the brand that most people, as you mentioned, are familiar with is Men's Wearhouse. And I want to talk about the journey of that brand and where it stands. But anecdotally, I'll share with the audience that somewhere in the neighborhood of a year ago, my young adult son was in need of a new wardrobe for a wedding. So I'm a big sports viewer. So I see a lot of Men's Wearhouse ads, and it dawned on me immediately. And I said to my wife, go to Men's Warehouse. And they were there, and about an hour later, suit, shirt, belt, shoes, socks, etc., out for $700, tailored, by the way, on the spot. Yep. It could not have been easier. So talk about the journey for Men's Warehouse, where it was, where it is today, and where you want the perception to be going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone probably knows, and again, I also am a student of brands' histories, and it was interesting hearing the gentleman from Jack in the Box talk about that brand's history. I've spent a lot of time when I worked on the Barbie brand in the archives of that brand and really understanding sort of where it came from. We all know George Zimmer looking right at camera telling you could buy one suit and get 5 free. That's not the brand today, but everyone remembers that. And so we've done a lot of work to really dig in on the equity of like, what do people know about Men's Warehouse as a brand? What is that perception? And then how do we move it forward? And so I think like one of the ways that we've been really trying to move it forward is just how we bring it to life. What is our content strategy? Whereby, like I said, and I said this somewhat jokingly, but it's really true, like the budget used to be 95% like television advertising, and you're like, okay, well, this is a little outdated. So now we're really trying to talk to a customer where they're at. And again, heard earlier about Jack in the Box using Twitch. We just started using Twitch as we talked to a prom customer and a teenager, and so we have a wedding business. So how do we get more focus on talking to the folks that are engaged for their weddings? So really trying to diversify the way that we're showing up is one thing. I think the other thing is we do a lot of research, and we know that there's this perception that like your dad or your grandfather shopped at Men's Warehouse, and so how do we use casting? How do we tell stories and narratives that again feel more relevant to that younger customer? And again, we've seen success there, and it's been really interesting. I think I anecdotally get stories all the time where someone's like, holy shit, I just walked by your store and it looks cool. And I'm like, this is a true story, so come and shop with us, because there are a million stories like the one you shared, which I love to hear, but we're at this place of what I like to call mass reconsideration. So how do I break through and get people to kind of pause and say, you know what, this is not a brand that, it's not the brand I thought it was, but it's a brand that I want to engage with.
So you used the word insight now a couple times, so let's dive into that. I assume you're talking about consumer insights as well as brand insights, which we'll get to the overall topic of data in a minute, because you cannot have a panel in any segment of the country right now without talking about data. But let's talk about those insights and how those inform every piece of your marketing strategy, whether it's creative, content alignment, media mix. Let's take them one by one.
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack. I would say, I've always been insights driven. I've also always been data driven. I couldn't have worked at Amazon if I wasn't. But you have to marry that with the brand side and really kind of understand the cultural zeitgeist so that you're using the data to directionally bring work to life that people are going to resonate with, right? If I look at Men's Warehouse, and to your point of customer insight, we started to get a lot of customer insight that they felt working with us was complex. So I'm not going to go to get my tuxedo for my wedding at Men's Warehouse because it's going to be complicated and time consuming. And so we spent the last 6 months working on a tool that's rolling out in a couple of weeks. I'm not going to fully divulge what it does or what it is, but it's insight-based to help cut down the amount of time that you need to spend when you're purchasing your suit or tuxedo. And in the test we've run so far, it's hugely successful. The store associates love it, the customers love it. So that's a way that we're taking an insight and responding to it pretty quickly and acutely, and I'm excited to bring that to life. Similarly, brand insight, perception that, again, we're not diverse, we don't represent everybody, and so I've been taking that, to really look at, again, what are the stories that we're telling, and if you go to any Men's Warehouse store, well, most Men's Warehouse stores across the country that can accommodate, the full fleet of signage that we deliver to them, there's a same-sex couple holding hands in the windows. And there'd never been a same-sex couple featured in a Men's Warehouse ad until the year 2021, which again, to me, felt a little bit late, but we did it. We got huge response from it. We're continuing to do more of it, and people are asking for it, right? So that was customer insight mixed with brand insight, that in order to be relevant, we had to showcase people in the world around them. And, I think I had the fortune of working on the Barbie brand at a time when it was undergoing mass transformation. And that representation and bringing stories to life that kids wanted to see, it's sort of a playbook that I've taken in Men's Warehouse, if you can find the analogy of selling dolls and suits. But it's like, how do you make sure that you're representing the customer and what they expect from you?
So before we get to, say, the media mix, let's talk about does this change? And we also discussed, where you were 95% television. We'll get to that in a minute. But has this really changed where you align your creative in terms of the type of content and where that content is that you're trying to associate with?
Yeah, and thank you for letting me take a deep breath before I tackle the media mix question. But yeah, I think, we certainly need to bring content to life that is right for the platform. And so, this is like a push, but I tell my teams, I don't want you to use the word ad. Nothing is an ad anymore. Give me a piece of content and we'll figure out where it's going to live and the length and so on and so forth. But, we can't do sort of one thing that's going to service everything. And so I've been sharing this example of, last year our spring campaign, we had 40 different edits. This year we had 190 because we need versioning. We need, platform right and platform specific work. It almost broke my team because they developed and created it and executed it themselves. But I think it's going to have been worth it because that's how we need to show up as brands to make sure we're delivering the right message at the right time.
Would you say, though, just as a marketer, forget Men's Warehouse, would you still say that the majority of marketers are not building creative that necessarily fits the appropriate platform? Or do you think that's come sort of full circle?
I think it's still a journey. We're not even doing it completely right at the moment, right? It's like a continued push. It's like getting people to think differently. And so I think there are some brands that I could probably, to my point of I tend to go to brands whereby there's an outdated media mix, an opportunity to reposition for customers. I'm sure there's a brand out there that I could step into and they're still all on TV and they still do a nice 30-second spot and call it a day. So I'm sure that still exists. But I do think a lot of marketers are realizing that you need to have that flexibility in order to get it right? Because there's also a lot more focus on the data, on the return on the investment, and so you can't show and prove that if you're not able to make sure that it's as efficient as possible.
By the way, we don't mind if you ask questions in the middle if anybody wants to do that. So I'll keep going, but we don't have to save it till the end. If there's something you heard that you want to follow up on, feel free. Yeah. So let's talk about the media mix. Actually, I'll challenge you on one thing before we get to the media mix. Why not? So I've had this debate, or at least I've stated my position a few times, and here I am talking to a former Amazon guy, so I'm glad we're sitting far apart. Whatever happened to good old intuition and gut? Is that gone? Is that just over at this point?
No, absolutely not gone. And going back to the point, and you how clearly I said that. So going back to the point I made earlier, if you have to take the insight, you have to take your data, and then you have to merge it with, I didn't use that word, but it is intuition, right? And sort of how do you canvas culture and understand what people are talking about? And that is the guidepost of gut, if you will. That the insight's not going to tell you everything. And, frankly, I was at Amazon at a time, I was in their fashion division at a time that they were really trying to grow engagement with just a lay customer around shopping with Amazon Fashion. And so I was given some liberties by which not all of my decisions had to be exactly data-based. And so you could really bring the sort of the brand story matters. It certainly matters. And I was having this debate yesterday with a former colleague and, a colleague of theirs now about that sort of data efficiency versus brand. And I think you definitely need both because the customer's not just going to resonate with, I'm going to pause. I don't think the customer's just going to resonate with. I'm not going to say that definitively, because I will say that we partner with our YouTube teams quite a bit, and they're just give me your footage, and we're just going to let the computer cut it into something, and then of course our creatives gasp because they're holy cow, this is not the narrative that I thought I just wrote, but this algorithm just chopped everything up together. And I say to them, you know what, if it's going to work, it's going to work, and we have to sort of keep that in mind alongside telling the true brand story that we want to build.
Well, I've spent my entire career on the content side, and at a couple different studios, and now where I am today. And I think I would be the first to admit we've probably relied on our gut too often, launching television shows, releasing movies. It's not to say there hasn't been research and focus groups, but generally speaking, somebody's in a position that really believes they understand what the audience is looking for. And, under the category of no-brainer, Bounce TV, like I said, is targeted towards the African-American consumer. We just launched a show called Act Your Age with 3 well-known black actresses who are portrayed very differently on television. And I don't think it's a coincidence. It's the highest rated show we've ever had on the network because it really fell into the cultural zeitgeist, but it wasn't based on us, oh boy, we better do a lot of data analysis on this. We just knew that it would be there. So I think that's really important to people like us to really understand, how you think about some of these things. So let's talk about the media mix because, again, not being naive, the landscape has changed.
Yep.
And you're trying to reach the consumer where they are and where they will most likely receive your message positively. So you've gone from a TV dominant, almost exclusive advertiser to...
We're about 40% TV now and 60% everything else. So that everything else is, OLV. So, we do a lot with Hulu, a lot with YouTube, and we're finding just continued success there. We have a really fractured audience. So I'm talking to a teenager who's shopping for prom, to their parents, to a bride-to-be, to a customer who needs a suit for an interview. So, our ability to really hone into those audiences on YouTube has proven successful for us. A lot on social, and it's sort of this adage, what's old is new, and someone was just up here who's doing out of home, and I used to say to my teams when I was on Barbie, I absolutely refuse to do out of home, don't even bring it to me because I'm not going to consider it. I've softened from that position because I think you always have to consider what tools are out there to get in front of the customer in the right way. And so, I share that because we're doing a lot of display advertising and video display specifically, and it's contextualized such that it's working extraordinarily well. And so it's sort of revisiting something that maybe before I would have not thought would have delivered what we needed to deliver. And I'm saying this, it's like heresy in a room of folks who are always looking to kind of push forward, and of course display should be effective, but I think as a marketer you get sometimes caught in the this is the mix that I'm comfortable with and it's been working, and you don't push enough on hey, we used to do this and we stopped doing it, but maybe we should look at it again. And so that's why I want to keep pushing myself and my teams to make sure that the mix continues to evolve. So that's where the mix is today. And the TV investments that we're making, it gives us reach. And I was sitting in a restaurant. It was obviously a really nice restaurant because they had TVs in the dining room, but in a restaurant here in Austin, and saw our commercial on the TV, right? And there it was. And now hopefully also if I'm in the audience that we're trying to reach, I'm going to get that work through other channels, and we have the consistency of touch points. But that's our mix.
Did you point out, Jason, let me just follow up and then I'll get to you. Did you point out the ad? Were you with friends saying, oh, funny, there's my ad?
I was, and I did.
Okay. Do you do that when you're sitting by your computer and you see that banner ad? Do you collect, hey, everybody come here, I got a banner ad going?
No, I don't. And so I think, maybe...
Okay.
I know, right? I know, because, TV still delivers as that sort of that mechanism that is looked at slightly differently. So that's kind of, it's a fair point. I mean, I think in my past I've also used TV as sort of that stunt, right? You lay the groundwork with your OLV, and then when you have a key moment, you're let's pulse TV, really quickly, give it a lot of rev, if you will, and then it kind of complements the rest of your mix.
Right. Jason usually asks tough questions, so you better get ready.
Oh, I'm ready.
Hey, everybody.
A Jason Adelman question, let's bring it.
What's up, guys? So, actually building upon the question you had, which was actually my question, Michael.
Oops.
On TV, but you talked about how the brand is not George Zimmer's brand anymore, right? You've gotten amazing press, and I've been thrilled to watch your career grow in a lot of the things you've been doing in kind of the wedding world, et cetera. Can you talk about how you've been able to utilize the new creative messaging in your television specifically to kind of bring the brand out in a new way, and where you've seen success there?
Sure. And I take nothing from George Zimmer and what he created by any means. So, when we canvass consumers, there's positive sentiment about him, about the brand, so on and so forth. So that's history that we need to leverage. But yes, we needed sort of a fresh start. And I think one of the things that I've been super fortunate to have been able to do the past year plus is, again, what we call brand advertising and not promotional and product advertising. So thus far, we do not have any price call outs on any of our, I'll call it video advertising, which as a marketer is largely unheard of, especially in retail, and really, really grateful to be able to do that because it allows us, again, to sort of tell that story. one of the things when I took on marketing leadership for our wedding business was realizing that we weren't talking to the bride at all, and guess what? She has something to say in this process. So, I hired an actual wedding photographer to shoot a campaign for us, and like gave that eye and that sort of ethereal like look and feel. Like we've been casting real couples. I was telling Michael, like the authenticity that you get on screen from real couples versus like pulling two models and like throwing them together, it's, unparalleled. So, there's been some key things that we've been doing. We turned on Pinterest. Surprise, surprise, there's 500 million wedding pins, and we'd never been there before. And so it's like just continuing to push and unlock and see how do we like bring these stories to life. The evolution of our wedding work, and we took the line that everybody knows, or they think they know, which is you're gonna like the way you look, I guarantee it, and shortened it, modernized it to be love the way you look, because frankly, we don't want you to like the way you look, we want you to love the way you look. Like your wedding day is a pretty big day. So we took that, launched it last year, and then this spring, brought that same story to life with like 5 different weddings with, again, diversity, different wedding thematics, so on and so forth. And so been able to like pay that off in ways that consumers are responding to. So if you happen to catch our spot right now on TV or served to you through a digital platform, there's a woman wearing a tuxedo. We have a lot of women that come in and want tuxedos, so let's show that. And so, I was sharing earlier, like put that work through focus groups. Everybody like pointed it out, they loved it. We're currently getting trolled on YouTube that we're being too woke. So it's an interesting balance. But I think like, again, it goes back to zeitgeist, intuition, gut. Like I'm not gonna let that change my gut, which is this is the right thing to do. And we need to showcase that and lots more to make sure we're representing the world that everyone sees around them.
Well, we literally, just before we got up here, we were just having a conversation about consumer complaints, et cetera, or as the previous panel said, in some ways, when a consumer does something, either mocks your brand or something in some way and it goes viral, don't fight City Hall. Find a way to embrace it and lean into it. So I think it's really important that you're not always going to get positive feedback, but I have to give marketers their props because 15 years ago, one letter, whether it was auto-generated or not, and they're pulling spots from, the most important shows or websites, et cetera. So I think today you have to embrace it. The previous panel, the panel before that on EDI, something resonated with me where one of the panelists, I'm not going to say took the exception to the word, but challenged the word target, my target audience. So let's talk about the multicultural audience, which is a word in and of itself, which I think has some negative connotations. But as you're segmenting your audience and you're looking around, you've used the word diversity, do you have either specific dollars or a strategy against different segments, whether it's Black, Latina, et cetera?
I also heard the sentiment around not using the word targeting and have taken that into practice even as we've been speaking just now, because I think that was a really salient point, talking about audiences versus targeting. So, I think we don't have budget like carved out by sort of I don't even call it demo that you're describing, but it's something that I think we have to continually keep an eye on, and like we don't, again, fracture our media investments by that type of audience necessarily, but it's about thinking through how do we showcase different communities in our work, and I've touched on a couple of them already, but it's that continued push and being really thoughtful about what we're showing and how we're showing it, and being authentic about it, because I also don't want to be like, let's just put something out there that means nothing to us and is really like performative. That is frankly the last thing that I want to do. And so you have to like make sure that like your teams, your business are also couched and really invested in the communities and the types that you're showcasing through the work. We do Spanish language television, which has been, again, working extraordinarily well. And that is honestly a different set of like casting. It's a different script. It's a whole different, right? Like we have to also lean into when we're talking to different audiences, making sure that we are speaking to them in the way that they're expecting to be approached by a brand, and it's not just one size fits all.
That makes sense. Again, I'll keep going, but feel free to jump in. So as a company, we clearly recognize what the consumer is doing. They're spreading their attention around, most specifically to CTV platforms. So we're leaning heavily into it. We're not naive. We understand that viewers are migrating, so that's why we're heavily in the fast business. But I'm also not afraid to take on a little controversy. I know we're at South by Southwest, and it's all about technology and different ways to consume content. But I want to ask you as a marketer, do you delineate between content, UGC, and premium-based content, and do you pay and recognize the value of one versus the other, or is an impression if it reaches your target audience? There's that word, target, if it reaches your audience.
You used it. I know. See, it's a learning. It's
new. It's the first day.
It's a learning. Quick side story about like learning things. I was at our corporate strategy meetings in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, and I presented the fact that we're rolling out pronoun pins to our 20,000 plus employees across the fleet. So that's sort of an exclusive because we're not talking about it publicly, but we're going to do a soft rollout because I think it's super important. And one of the biggest insights we get from our employee surveys is that people want to bring their true selves to work. And this was a really visible way that we could do that. And I went to the Joseph A. Bank here in Austin a couple days ago. Employees were wearing their pronoun pins. I asked them how they felt about it. They loved it, but it's optional. Not everyone has to do it. I share that because it's a continued learning of being able to address people by their pronouns and making sure that my team will often look at a non-binary model that we cast and said, oh, she, and I pause, do you know their pronouns? Anyway, share that quickly because I think like I'm going to trip up a couple times and probably still use the word targeting, but I'm going to work on it and make sure that I get better.
Any questions? Oh. Sorry. Do you have more? Sorry,
I didn't even get to the answer to his question. I took like a little side path, but I'm going to get to it now, and then we can close out.
He was scared. That's why he's
totally
stalling to come up with a way to make me happy.
I think each segment that you described, Michael, has value. And I think whether it's like your premium content, whether it's your UGC, whether it's your like, quick and dirty cuts that the team just like creates off of some footage that you have. An impression is not an impression because there's quality differences between that impression, certainly. There's quality in terms of the audience that's receiving it. There's quality in terms of like the context and the mindset of that audience when like based on the platform that it's on. That said, like a consistent message that is used and seen across an ecosystem of platforms is going to be effective, in my humble opinion. So I want to take advantage of all of those impressions because I do think they're all cumulative. Thank you. Valuable, even if they may vary in quality or impact.
Okay. Did I cut you off?
No, I was going to see if anyone had any questions. I don't want to cut you guys off.
Questions or
Yeah. Yeah, you can say your name and who you're with.
Sure. Hey, I'm with YML. Thanks for doing what you're doing. I definitely grew up with all those commercials, by the way, of like, you're going to like the way you look, I guarantee it. So I'm just curious, you've talked a lot about mixing the marketing across an array of platforms. How have you invested in sort of the digital experience as well for Joseph A. Bank or Men's Warehouse, like treating that as an extension of the brand promise as well?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And the tool that I like sort of alluded to that is rolling out in a few weeks is actually like I think a big step forward in our digital experience. Because we also want to make sure, we have a product that like, we have a really great and growing e-commerce business, but people want to come into a store and try something on. And so like, how do we bring that to them virtually? And so that's something that I think we have some stuff coming out shortly that'll like start to tackle that, but I think we have a lot of really exciting work to go to fully bring that to life. We're working on some stuff with Snap that, again, I can't speak about quite yet, but like they're excited about, we're excited about, because again, like how do you like give people the opportunity to try something on virtually? So definitely like on our radar, on our roadmap. And like I said, I think like just more work to come.
Other?
Awesome. We probably have time for one or two more questions if anyone has anything else.
All right, I'll end with one.
Yeah.
What is either your bold prediction for the future or prediction sure to go wrong in the retail industry?
Oh, and here I thought you were going to ask me for like Oscar red carpet productions, but
no,
that's okay. That's okay.
Well, I gave you my predictions on what the women will be wearing.
That's fine. I think like the collective we that work in retail are at a really interesting point of like we and other brands are going to be opening stores in 2023. And you think about that, and it feels somewhat counterintuitive. But I think there's just sort of like a a reset on like what does the retail footprint look like, and how do you make sure you're being super strategic with placing stores where customers are actually wanting them. And I think one of the things I've been reading a lot about is that sort of like people are removing from city cores, and you're showing up more and more stores in suburbs because people are not commuting to work in the same way they used to. I think it's that reassessment, and it goes back to like why I think you always have to reassess your marketing mix. In the same way in retail, you always have to reassess like where are you showing up, why, and like is it working for you the way it used to, and do you need to figure out something new going forward?
All right, what will the men be wearing tonight? What's the trend?
Double-breasted tuxedo all the way. Yeah, I think like there's a big double-breasted like trend, and I'm here for it. So
Okay. Thank you very much,
thanks
everybody.
everybody.